All right. Welcome, everyone, to our second episode of our third season, where we're sort of, pitching this new kind of format, and we're super excited about kind of introducing this video format that we're kind of implementing in this season of A Dose of Dizzy. So for all of you who tuned into the first episode, we had Dr. Jamie Bogle. That was a very interesting conversation, and this month's episode is not going to disappoint. We have two of the audiology legends, which we'll get into. They don't absolutely need an introduction, but we will kind of do some introductions a little bit shortly. So, Liz, you want to kind of get us started? Who do we have on?
I know. I was trying to make a joke earlier to Daniel. I'm like, they've written our textbooks, yes. They've edited our papers, they have controlled the future of vestibular, which is amazing. So we have two greats on today, Dr. Devin McCaslin and Dr. Gary Jacobson, and we're really excited to hear, their perspective. They both have contributed so incredibly much to the field of vestibular and a lot of our core projects that we refer to. So the protocols that we use, the questionnaires we use, everything I feel like goes back to one or both of you. So let's start with just some basic introductions where you can tell us who you are, and what we're most interested in is how you got into vestibular in particular. So let's start with Dr. Jacobson.
Okay. My story started in the early 1500s when audiology was pretty young. Probably my biggest influence in getting into audiology, and then from there into the vestibular sciences, was an undergraduate professor at Cal State Fullerton by the name of Mike Metz. And I was finishing up my undergraduate work and trying to figure out where I was going to go to graduate school. I knew that it had to be a place that didn't require GREs, because I always come out looking dull normal, kind of. And I knew I wouldn't be able to get into any super great place. So he was teaching sort of an overview in vestibular sciences, and as part of a larger area of electrophysiology. And at that time I was thinking about going into speech pathology, but flannel boards can only get you so far, and I just decided that I was going to look at something else. And Mike said, why don't you come to a couple of classes? And I have a private practice in Garden Grove, and so he invited me to come watch what he was doing. It was some measurement, a measurement-based science field, and it didn't require med school, and it was probably as close to a medical area that I would ever get. And I keep saying that if it hadn't been audiology, I have no idea what I would have, would have done. I probably would have been standing on a corner site selling wind-up or something like that. So he really was an influence, and I think his generosity of his time, and that he took to to sit down and talk with me about it. I mean, at that point I was a senior in college, and that was pretty extraordinary. And then from that point, it was really in graduate school, there really just wasn't anybody who was an expert in the area. And so, any lectures that were going to be done in those classes, that they sort of got assigned to me, because, starting at that point, I became the person in the class that probably knew more than anybody else. So that's kind of, my story of how I got into the profession.
And I think you would have done great things outside of audiology.
Theater major, you would have been theater acting.
Yeah. I was a theater arts minor. Yes.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. What type of theater?
Readers theater. Oh my God.
That's so interesting. Well, Dr. McCaslin, give us the background about how you got into vestibular.
Yeah. So, but mom's an audiologist. Oh, sorry. My mom's an audiologist, so that kind of got me into audiology. And then, it was the idea was to take over practice, and she was living a good life, and I sell hearing aids, and I found out I was just terrible at it. And so, I ended up saying, I like auditory electrophysiology, and so at Ohio State, went and worked on auditory label potentials, and so mismatch negativity, some of the N1 cortical potentials. And so then graduated there and then went to the Dayton VA. That was my first job, and then worked there for a while, and then Gary hired me away. And so you're really looking at the inspiration right there, Gary, who inspired me to do balance. And when I first got to Henry Ford, we were, we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We were doing people would show up with the direct brain recordings from neurology. What we would do is map the auditory cortex, take the electrodes coming right out of the back of their head, and you put them back right, because that was important. Take up wrong part of your brain. And then we did some magnetoencephalography. So we were doing, meg work and magnetic fields. And that was a lot of fun working with physicists. And then I started to notice as MRI started popping up about that time in the late 90s. And so we went from doing, if you look at the graph, like doing 1,500 to 2,000 ABRs for diagnostics to it was just plummeting because MRI was taking it over. And so I thought that offered an opportunity. I said, well, clinic evoked potentials are probably maybe going to be limited going forward. So, balance opportunities opened up there. And so Gary, and, he would help me sort of transition into balance. And so I'd really not have a big background in it until I got to Henry Ford. And so everything I really learned and was inspired by sitting right there in that office, right? So, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
That's incredible. I generally know, you two met, or while Gary was the chair of the department chair for Henry Ford, and there's a whole great history there, transitioning then to Vanderbilt. One question that I did have is, we know all of the contributions to make the Division of Audiology what it is at Vanderbilt. What was sort of the coming in, Dr. Jacobson? What was sort of the vision that you had? Once you landed at Vanderbilt, what was your vision for audiology, specifically for vestibular science?
Well, that's very simple, because it was just, make it the best program in the nation.
How about the room that was there when we showed up, where it was with a wood caloric irrigator and wood on it?
Oh, wow.
And it was a two-cycle engine. And we had to mix the gasoline and the oil together. But we couldn't be in the room when it was running, because you could get asphyxiated. Okay, that's not. But what had happened was that Dr. Hall had left a couple of years before, and there was a MA level audiologist who was overseeing the medical audiology program. And so, I had come down here to look at the position in 2000, and it just didn't feel, the timing didn't feel right. And so it took another couple of years before I thought it was the right time to come in and just try to revamp the program, make it contemporary. Dr. Bess had given us a chunk of money that we could use to buy equipment, and we sort of, did more than a facelift. It really brought the program back up to you're talking about juggernaut, to it's becoming the juggernaut. So So, and specific to the vestibular sciences area, we had a rotary chair that had never been used. It was actually used as a storage cabinet kind of things were sort of put in there. And so, we got that running, and there was a room that the ENGs were where they were being done, and it was very, very cramped, and there were actually footprints on the wall because tall people, they would have their feet literally on the wall because they were tall. So that's sort of what we, and we're talking about me, but understand that Devin and I came in here as a sort of partnership, and Devin and I had worked together for 10 years, something like that, and he knew what the way I thought, I knew the way he thought, and it worked very well at Henry Ford. And so what we really tried to do is use Ford as a model because it had worked, and this was a tertiary care center, and Ford was a tertiary care center, and so that was sort of the start of the restart of the program, the clinical program. The Bill Wilkerson Center had been running, with all of their accolades. I mean, it's just a wonderful place. So, yeah.
We had originally, it's interesting that you bring up how much you guys have worked together throughout your careers, because we were originally planning on interviewing you separately, but we were thinking it's super cool. I feel like your research collaboration is really unique within vestibular, and you guys have been really able to probably use each other's strengths to really produce quite a bit. So thinking back to how you collaborated over the years and maybe some advice to give to younger vestibular researchers, what do you think is important for like a successful research collaboration, or maybe igniting a collaboration with someone even across a different facility?
Who do you want that to go to?
Whoever has a better answer. No, I'm kidding. You can answer.
I'm out.
Well, no, I think there's some, right. I mean, I think the number one thing you can get is a mentor. There's really three things you need to have a successful vestibular sort of training program. You need mentors, people that have a large knowledge base, right, that can kind of keep you out of trouble, give you good ideas, have established research programs. And then you got to have patients, right? So you got to have patients to see. I mean, you learn more from patients than anybody. Every patient you learn something from. I feel that's true. And thirdly, I think you need students, right? So students, they'll be doing something. They go, why do you do that? I go, I'm not sure why I do that, right? They ask questions you wouldn't normally. You really, they make you better. So I think with those three things in mind, that is what is sort of the environment that sort of creates, the magic that happens in a research program. And then, really, for people trying to find it, I mean, you have to have a good mentor and one that fits with you.
Yeah, that's
absolutely true. And you have to be okay with rejection, right? I would give Gary a paper and go, this is the biggest piece of garbage I've ever read.
You're paraphrasing.
I'll go read.
The thing that I keep thinking of, as far as the training programs go, is that you can have all the equipment in the world, and you can have, all the professors in the world, but unless you have patients, you really don't have anything. You have a bunch of instrumentation and a bunch of professors that have nothing to do. And, that's probably whether it was Henry Ford or whether it was here at Vanderbilt, that, that's what I feel probably best about is building the patient load. I think that when we last checked, and Daniel, you may know the exact number, I'm not sure, but I think we're up to about 1,600 patients in our vestibular science clinic, and that's just insanely. That's a huge population, and that means that those are potential subjects. research projects. And when Dev was here, and then of course he's carried this on in his work afterwards. It's just such a essential part of training.
And it's interesting to hear your answers to that because, I gave you an option to brag about all of your accomplishments, but the fact that you turned it back to the patients, I think is really, one, awesome and a great lead for a lot of young researchers to keep focusing on the patients. And I think it's very true in the research you have published together and separately is that you've kept the patient at the forefront and made a lot of your research, all of it, very translational to the clinic, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, really, you can't think about clinical vestibular research without thinking about many of the studies that you two have collaborated on. Kind of piggybacking on top of that, is there a favorite research? Is there a favorite project that you two have worked on together? Where did that go? Was there something that you wish you could have carried forward with that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, I would say one that Dev mentioned.
I wonder what you're gonna pick. I'm dying to know. Like, I'm fine.
We're gonna have to do like the game show where one person writes it down, and we'll see if the other gets it.
No, I think just because it took us so far out of our comfort zone.
Oh no!
That it's the MEG. I mean, it's the MEG.
Yeah.
Because I mean, in order to keep an MEG system alive, you have to feed it liquid helium, and that's like minus 1 million degrees, and if you get some on you turn into a popsicle, and so the physicists would come in with these huge gloves on, and God only knows, I had no idea what they were doing, but they opened up the door to the magnetically shielded room, and this vapor would be coming out, and then finally the physicists would wind up coming out of the room. But it was amazing the information that we could get, and I guess I would also say that it was I guess one of my disappointments, one of my few research disappointments, is that we had a study where we were looking at plasticity in the auditory cortex, and what we were looking at the size of the tissue area in the brain and in the auditory cortex, and how that area changed after the person had a high frequency hearing loss. And what we were expecting was that the dipole location and the strength would be greater after the hearing loss had occurred at the edge frequency of their hearing loss. So that was a lot of fun. And I think the number one thing that I can say that about the research area and vestibular sciences is that we've had a great time. I mean, it's just been, I can't think of, can you think of anything that we've done where we didn't have fun doing it?
Oh, no. See, that's my favorite study of all time, because you had to degauss it. You did their teeth with this tape. You had to demagnetize the fillings. And we had to work with this physicist, and his groin always hurt. You want to talk about how bad his groin hurt? You had to sit there for hours. I'm like, dude, I don't.
You're like, John, okay, it's enough. Listen,
my junk just hurts. It's like, it's like, you're just trying to get the study done. So.
Shortly after that, you said your safe word.
That's right. That's out of here. No, my favorite study, balance study, is when we ordered that crazy thing from Australia, and we opened that Falls clinic ready to shock, grandma's feet with this somatosensory thing. You'd hear them moaning, because you had to get a toe twitch to do these somatosensory. You had to stick all these electrodes. They're 80 years old. You have to shock them. You have to shock their feet and get a toe twitch. You get these responses, late, as they travel on the spinal cord up to the brain. and you got keep turning up the voltage, right? They're like, oh, so the gain thresholds kick in before the motor thresholds, and so you're trying to get that tone, but like, yeah, we're only going and then it's like, oh my god, like I can't shot this. All these just there's some ugly looking feet. I mean,
we were arc welding Mammon Peepaw.
it was like they were in so much pain, or that pain threshold. So then we said, you know what? I can't shot Grandma's feet anymore. We're going to open. Remember, we bought that low risk, that low tech thing from Australia that's showing up.
Well, is it a story attached to that story is that this was a guy named Stephen Lord in Australia. He had developed falls in a box. We wound up calling it. It was a big cardboard box, right? And the first time we bought one of these, it got stuck in San Francisco, I think, or LA in customs, and they wanted to know what was in it. And and they said, how much are you declaring? I think it cost $10,000 or something like that, maybe $12,000. And they said, what is in here that's $12,000? And we said, well, it says that there is a bar chair and it was like
a piece of foam and a vibrator.
A piece of foam and a vibrator, and
what? I said that.
Yeah, you could see the customs guy in the other angle.
All right, who got scammed?
So it showed. Tell them all what shows up, and then we get the phone, right?
Yeah, you gave away the phone to one of the students who had a cat.
Somebody else said, man, so we thought the phone, like you're supposed to stand on this phone. We thought it was packing stuff. She said, could you have it for a cat? I'm like, yeah, I think for your cat, because like a piece was missing out of it. You already found out that's like the calibrated phone. Like, we got to have the phone back. It was just, it was like stuff he had literally taken stuff out of his house and sent it to us. Like $10,000. Like the chair was like a bar chair off. Like, it was just like.
That phone was nasty too. It was old. That was like old phone.
Before or after the cat, was it nasty?
Yeah.
I think it was before.
That's when you have to shot the feet anymore. Because it was like he had a falls clinic, then we got a publication of it, but it was, you had to bring them back like twice for 4 hours, like an 8 hour.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's brutally.
Poor Mama.
It's funny because you're our second episode, but every mention of the publication that like stands out in your mind are these like outlandish, just interesting, which is kind of cool to hear about, because I think many people view vestibular research in one simple box and what to do. And I think it's nice to think creatively, and sometimes they don't work out or change how we practice, but sometimes they're really helpful to know that.
Yeah, hearing about your experience with working with these physicists, incredible. And it's like,
it's so weird. I mean, nothing against physicists, but I mean, it's just, they just live on a different plane, right?
Yeah.
The elder scientists, physicists, you'd sit down and talk with Norm, and he would look at you and he would go to sleep.
Yeah.
But he would be completely lucid if you asked him what.
I'm such a talent.
It was bizarre.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have a question, because Daniel and I are both like fairly early in our careers, and there's many people that listen to this podcast that are still students. So my outlandish question for you is, if you were beginning your vestibular career right now, what would you focus on, or what would be your area of focus on within vestibular? Or what would you be most excited about to spend your career on?
I'll let the big man go first.
What?
Come on, man. What you got?
I don't think I'd specialize in anything. I would want to know as much as I could know. I mean, your credibility in the medical community is directly related to how much you know, your fund of knowledge. And you will not get the respect that you deserve unless you're able to measure up to other scientists, career scientists. this. I mean, that's what I would say. I mean, I'm still, trying to sort this out because, when I started, there was no curriculum. So this was all, what's up here? It's like a bunch of dangling wires and sparks and stuff because, it was all reading books and reading studies and replicating them and, and hoping that what you're reading was correct and not a big lie. And we've been caught by that. We've tried to replicate, you remember that?
Oh, I remember when you went and bought all the wheelchair. Oh, I do. Yep. That didn't really turn out right, did it?
And then the difference in MEG results were we had to get Germans to come in because the German group said that the reason why their data was different from ours was because they were
aimed for different, right? That was the explanation.
Yeah, just
made me true.
No, get out.
Devin, what would you say?
I think, I'm a young clinician. I'm getting my clinical skills up. I'm working, I'm reading, I want to become the best. I mean, I'm still doing that, right? We still read, we still talk, we do journal clubs. Now that's lifelong learning. The areas I think that are exciting, the areas I think that are going to really fundamentally change how we do, when we say vestibular, I mean, I think, we say that, but we don't say vestibular diagnostic, they're saying this big word, and I think that's what it's going to become. But, so I think the two really exciting areas, and you had Jamie on here, I think, I haven't seen it yet, but, galvanic stimulation, I think, is going to really change, the way we do something with therapeutics and things like that. I think there's a lot of upside on that as more and more commercially available and, FDA-approved systems come out. And you can do amazing stuff with that. And they've been in that space for a while. And then one of my big interests, I think, is really big data AI. I think that, that is going to, in terms of, you can look at 10,000 patients and say 10,000 patients with these diagnostic findings and these comorbidities pulled from the medical record do best if you give them this treatment. You can actually give them percentages using predictive modeling on how to treat people. I mean, it will really be a game changer. Good for the patient, right? So, it gets some, faster diagnosis, less cost, and best outcomes. And that's kind of what we're shooting for. And then I think the last thing, I guess, one other area is really, I think outcomes. I think we've been doing outcomes all wrong, maybe. Not that I'd love the DHI. Actually, I'd love the DHI. I'm not going to say that, but it's who doesn't. But I think outcomes. We just did a paper, and the outcomes that we gave on all the standardized ones, nothing moved, but then they loved, if you ask them patient experience, they loved it. It was great. They learned, they'd send their family members. So those two things are disparate: patient experience and what they learned and what they did versus what we're giving them. And I'm wondering, are we measuring the right things? And sort of, I think we're going to have to go to something such as customized outcomes where we go, what is, when they come in, what is successful for you? What are you going to qualify as success? Because I think it's different for everybody. I think that's why everything's washing out. I mean, we get outcome measures and all kind of washed out. But if we had singularly asked each person, what is success for you? Then, I think you see it's different for people, right? I think that AI, will be able to generate on the fly customized outcomes for people
that's like the what was the hearing aid outcome measure?
The Dizzy Cozy. There it is.
Where you can choose, you can personalize a couple of questions or something. Was it that Gatehouse?
Yeah, maybe.
I thought it was Gatehouse.
Don't get in that space.
Yeah. That is interesting, though, because you're right. Everyone's internally motivated by a different level of success. So,
what's success for you? I think we need to get to that. First, we say individualized healthcare. I think you need to individualize the outcome, right? Right. So,
well, I think that's super interesting. And if there's one thing Daniel and I've learned, over doing this podcast the last couple of years and digging into research, is that I do think that the future of vestibular research is open and it's bright, and a lot of students are super excited about it, which makes us excited because we want to see the field continue to grow and progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And one question that just popped up in my mind, and it's the perfect opportunity to ask it. After years of having successful research programs, what advice would you give to a student really interested in vestibular research and, wanting to either participate in an active line of research or even just building their own, what are some steps or some words of wisdom that you would provide them?
Get a PhD.
Well, I think it's back to good mentor, and I think something Gary sort of reined me in on that I learned is like focus, right? You want to do everything. When I was young, right? I mean, I wanted to do it all. I wanted to be in every study, and I think that there's something to being said, like, you got to say no. You have to learn to say no to some things. Everything seems great, all the opportunities seem great, but say no so that bandwidth can be put on things that sort of prioritized in terms of what the questions you're interested in asking. And I think our research, Gary and I, I'm sort of modeled after him since he's my mentor, and sort of patients gave us our questions, right? I mean, that's where it's a little different.
Well, that's clinical research.
Right. I mean, that's sort of what we do. And that's a little different than, bench or, other sorts of research, but that's, I like stuff you could translate in immediately. The question immediately changes what we're doing. That's kind of exciting.
See, I'm concerned that, and Daniel has heard me talk about this before, but I'm concerned about the number of PhDs we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
It's serious, a very serious issue, I think. Because my generation is quite literally dying off, and the only way I could be a doctor of something when I was in school was to get a PhD. And, I mean, it's expensive and it takes time. And what is your perception, Daniel, about the importance of getting a PhD?
I think what it helped provide was answer all of the questions that kind of give you those extra set of tools to be able to really take your research where you wanted it to go. And really provided a lot of invaluable, most of the skills, the valuable skills that I feel like I've learned that aren't necessarily audiology related. I learned during my PhD. So like, computer programming, that's definitely like a second hobby of mine. And that was a really great skill that helped me, in my dissertation research and even the research that I'm doing now. And I learned that, during my PhD, as well as, learning how to kind of formulate or, more or less applying like inferential statistics on the research that I was doing. So a lot of the statistical work, I felt like we're really fine-tuned during that course. And, I think even just, I would say like more or less those extra set of skills that,
could anybody but a PhD be successful competing for extramural funding?
I think anybody, whether regardless of the AUD, PhD, can be involved in research, and there's certainly a lot of professionals out there currently actively involved in a lot of research studies. If you were interested in being a PI of a lab, or really trying to secure external funding at the federal level, most of those requirements do require at least a PhD.
The unsung hero, though, is industry, with Liz on here.
Right.
That what happens is, and in cochlear implants does this in spades. Like, industry will invest in a project in a clinic, and, AUDs and PhDs are involved in that. But what happens is that they figure out it isn't working. They don't put any more money into it, right? It's pretty, and so what happens, you get a federal grant, you're on 5 years, you're going to run that federal grant for 5 years, and it's not working. And so I think there's something to be said. I think the pendulum has swung the other way. I think it used to be, oh my God, industry is bad and you shouldn't work with them. And it's all, now I think it's coming back and go, yeah, industry kind of gets things done and they have the resources to get things done. And when they partner with, clinicians, I think that in addition to large federal grants and foundation money, I think you need it all. But I think industry plays a key role in driving a lot of innovation. especially in cochlear implants and vestibular. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I think especially I was a student who considered getting my PhD and AUD PhD and then decided not to. And I do feel like because I have an interest in research, it would be a lot easier to be able to headline a lot of projects and understand research at a higher level than I can. And that was one of the reasons Daniel and I had started this podcast is I was full-time in the clinic. Daniel was in his PhD and maybe just starting your postdoc at Vanderbilt. And I'm like, I got to stay up to date on research. It is hard if you are not actively getting your PhD or in a lab to be able to stay up to date on research because you're seeing patients full time. So we're hoping, and I think it's true with this podcast, that people are at least getting some exposure to research, a higher level of importance of why, research needs to happen. And hopefully that will result in more PhDs who are investing, because that's really what's going to get our field to grow, is getting those researchers for sure. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I mean, our goal was to let our listeners learn a little bit about the person behind the publication, because when you know someone, you're more likely to read a little bit more of what they publish. So we'll definitely be asking you for a few of your favorite papers that you've been on. We'll share that on our YouTube and Spotify and Instagram and all the places we are. But any last words before we leave this episode, advice for students, young clinicians, or just things you want to say? We'll start with Gary.
Get more people to be audiologists. Let's grow this profession, especially this vestibular sciences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm hopefully you get good exposure to vestibular. And if you think you're just not, and it's hard because not every program has a great vestibular program. And so if you're not exposed to it, you're not with somebody that's excited, it's kind of hard to get excited about it, right? Hearing you guys teaching the, vestibular course, it's probably not their favorite thing. So, you think you might have an inclination, I think you should just cold call people and say, or Gary and I, and find someone even, outside of your, wherever, if you're training or if you're interested in doing more, just, cold call, go to ABS, meet people, you have to go out and you have to seek it.
Send an email to McCaslin MC.
You should send me an email. I think it's weird because a lot of, we want patients. So people like myself or like Julie Honecker, these places don't have academic programs because we're seeing patients. That's what we do. And so, but we're always interested in working with students. So I think in vestibular more than anywhere, it's kind of interesting. You have to sort of connect with these, go connect with them independent of your academic program. And I think it's just taking, that's why you should go to ABS or meetings and people.
That's excellent. And I feel like this is a kind of like a bonus question, and I hope this doesn't drag on for another 15 months, like completely double the episode, because it is a big topic. But, regarding vestibular education, where does vestibular education need to go? We see, I know with the Barrenness Society, they just, laid out recently kind of some guidelines on some core curriculum that needs to be involved in any program. But from an audiology standpoint, where does vestibular education, where can it improve? Where can it go from here?
The tough question.
It's a tough question. It is.
I don't think the academic programs are going to have the bandwidth to do it. They're not all going to be able to hire a PhD in vestibular science. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. So I think what has to happen is national organizations are going to have to start to rally and create some sort of safety net, to sort of help support education and, learning for people that are interested in vestibular, whether that's, however that looks, but, having trainings and having online courses. And I think our national organizations need to step up and supplement, because it's so scattered right now, right? You don't know, if you don't, we have no idea what the quality of students coming out in vestibular is. From Vanderbilt, there's a couple that are good, but other than that, you're like, it's all hit or miss, right? And it's usually depending on their placements. Maybe they got a good placement, maybe they didn't. I think that the national organizations have to step up and sort of help us figure out how we're going to make that a little more consistent.
Yeah, I think this is universities. And you can even take it back to standards, setting academic standards. This is going to be a really hard sell, to incorporate vestibular, officially incorporate vestibular sciences into audiology. It works for the programs that have developed, 2 or 3 courses, didactic courses. But I think that's going to be the hard part. There just aren't there aren't enough vestibular science people out there.
I don't think you can do it. I don't think there's any way. There's 77 programs, give or take a couple. I mean, how are you going to find 77 people that have expertise in vestibular? You're not. So.
And we hear that from students, like people message our account and like, how can I get more vestibular placements? Because it's not even just the education at the school, but the placements around the school.
Absolutely.
And students are like yearning for access to this. So I do think something's going to have to change in order to expand our field from that end as well.
Yeah.
Great answers, great comments regarding such a huge topic. So we really, really appreciate, both of your insights and appreciate the time and work that you continue to put in and contribute to audiology every day. I know that personally, both of you have served as my mentors, for quite some time, and as far many other students. So, you couldn't really be in audiology, or especially in vestibular audiology, without coming across you two at some point. So I really appreciate everything you've done.
Autograph.
Yeah. Send the 3rd edition of the Bounce book. There you go.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks for tuning in for another month. Again, we'll be posting resources and papers that you can check out. We encourage you to read the research, because that's what's really going to change what we do in the clinic. And stay tuned for next month's episode. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.